for my channel, The Mental Traveler. I'm Caro Herrera, and today I'm going to be reviewing a story called Wuthering Heights. I shall be reviewing the book, which was published in 1847 and written by Emily Bronte, and 4 of its adaptations. The one from 1939 starring Laurence Olivier and Merle Oberon, the one from 1970 with Timothy Dalton, the one from 1982 starring Juliette Binoche, Ralph Fiennes, Jeremy Northam, Janet McTeer, and the one from 2009 with Tom Hardy and Charlotte Rampling. Before I begin though, let me just say that this will be a video with spoilers, because I don't feel like I can make justice to that masterpiece that is Wuthering Heights without a detailed review. So yes, beware. I can still remember the moment that I first became aware of Wuthering Heights. I was a teenager and I was at Blockbuster, and I already loved by that time period dramas. So when I saw the cover for the 1982 film version of Wuthering Heights, I picked it up, not knowing what it was gonna be about. But I also recognized Ralph Fiennes, and I really liked him as an actor, and he was so handsome back then. So of course I wanted to watch it, and I was very excited to do so. So yes, I watched it, and I'm sure that I wasn't the only young girl who was swept off her feet by the passionate relationship between Kathy and Heathcliff. And while my perception of their love and the story as a whole has changed over the years as I grow older and mature, I still adore it and treasure it in my heart as one of the greatest English classics out there. Because after having seen the 1982 version, I quickly bought the book and devoured it, and while I'm certain that I didn't quite get everything that was going on, I still enjoyed it. And I also saw, as soon as I could, as many adaptations of it as possible. My favorite ones are the ones that I'm gonna review, and over the years I've introduced at least 4 of my friends to the epic story of Wuthering Heights. Set in the 18th century in the moors of Yorkshire, England, this is a tale of Heathcliff's life, an orphan gypsy who is found when he is a boy by an old country gentleman and brought to his home to be raised as his own. His home is called Wuthering Heights because of its geographical location. Mr. Earnshaw already has 2 children though. Hindley, his eldest son, detests Heathcliff from the start and is determined to make his life miserable for usurping his father's affections. The old man's other child is a girl called Catherine. She is a wild, mischievous child, and soon she and Heathcliff become inseparable. With time they grow up and fall in love, but Cathy decides to marry a rich neighbor instead because he is more respectable. There are some misunderstandings along the way, but Heathcliff, heartbroken and hurt, leaves without a word, sending Cathy into a deep depression. She nonetheless marries Edgar Linton, and after a while of quiet marriageable life, Heathcliff returns, intent on extracting his revenge. With time he's grown into a clever, rich man, so it's not that hard for him to torment Hindley Earnshaw and Edgar Linton, the former by becoming possessor of his house and estates and raising up his son Herton as a rude, ignorant young man, and the latter by marrying his sister Isabella and treating her worse than a dog. While all of this is going on, it's clear that Heathcliff and Catherine still love each other deeply, but they can't be together, because in the end Cathy dies during childbirth, leaving a distraught, vindictive, spurned lover behind her, and a gentle husband, as well as a little baby girl. 17 years later, Heathcliff is still intent on getting his revenge, but now on the children of his enemies. In the end, though, he dies, and we can only hope that his ghost has joined Cathy's and that they are now both at peace as their spirits wander over the wild moors of Yorkshire, as they used to love to do when they were children. So I give that book, Wuthering Heights, a 5 out of 5 stars review and highly recommend it to anyone who loves classics, period dramas, famous books, or passionate torrid love affairs. Over the years, I've read it several times, the most recent one a couple of weeks ago for this review, and every time I get something different from it, not only regarding my perception of the characters, their actions, motivations, and relationships, but with the writing style and the purpose/message of the story as a whole. When I first read it, as I've said, I was too young to really grasp everything that was going on, and my mind was too fresh and easily impressed, and I couldn't quite understand it all. But then when I was in my early 20s, I reread it, and now I absolutely love the way it's written, narrated by Nellie Dean. Because before I didn't like the fact that we didn't get to see the moments when Heathcliff and Cathy were alone in the moors. It annoyed me, and I remember thinking that something similar happened with The Great Gatsby, because I really wanted to see those intimate moments between the lovers. But now I like the way Wuthering Heights is written. And I think it's a credit to the author that we can still get a pretty good idea of the raw, passionate, and bitter, everlasting hatred of the main characters throughout the years, and their passionate affairs. Besides, it's cool to see the way adaptations over the years come up with the things that Heathcliff and Cathy might have been doing when they were alone in the moors. But yes, overall I love the story as a whole. I love how wild and poignant and raw it is, particularly when compared with other English classics, for example Jane Austen, which reminds me that I actually saw not that long ago a panel that was really cool because it compared Jane Austen's works with Wuthering Heights, and famous actors recreated scenes from the books as professionals discussed the story's merits and flaws. But getting back to Wuthering Heights, it's unfortunate though understandable why readers were so shocked with it back in the 1800s, but I wish that Emily Bronte could have known how popular her story would become one day. And I mean, talking about this great author, the way Wuthering Heights created is also an amazing talent on its own. I love the Bronte sisters, and Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte is such a literary masterpiece, but I'm amazed particularly when it comes to Emily Bronte's only book, when I come to imagine how on earth did she conceive the idea of this story, seeing as Emily never married and the man she knew most intimately besides her father was her alcoholic brother Branwell. Anyways, it's so intriguing to picture Emily pouring out her soul into her work, inspired maybe in part by the fact that she lived in the place where it's set, an untamed, breathtaking part of northern England. Anyways, talking about untamed things, I want to mention how my perception of the relationship between Cathy and Heathcliff has changed over the years. When I was younger, I adored it and I longed to feel such passion even though it frightened me. But by now I can see how destructive and selfish it was. And not only that, but I no longer think of Heathcliff as the ideal romantic figure. And this isn't a bad thing because in my opinion this allows him to be the most iconic of Byronic heroes, which are in a way the bad boys of classics. And I mean, it's certainly entertaining to read about this tormented, cruel, cynical, and yet emotionally driven, lonely antagonist. And I mean, getting back to Byronic heroes, Heathcliff does really embody one to perfection. He lives by his own rules, he has a troubled past, he has many dark secrets, he's highly attractive, and he has a problematic nature. But yes, again, love the story of Wuthering Heights as a whole. I can't help but concentrate on the relationship between Cathy and Heathcliff. I keep getting back to it, even though Cathy dies way before the story ends. Her ghost keeps on haunting not only Heathcliff and the wild moors she loved to roam as a child, but every word and page and action to the very end. One of the other things that I've observed as I grow older is to in a way justify the characters a bit more in the sense that they were mere children when they do and say certain things, but they never really outgrow childish behavior, seeing as they can hold grudges to perfection, for example. And this puts me in mind of my favorite character from the Harry Potter books, Severus Snape. I always associate him with Heathcliff because they share many similarities. They both grow up and fall in love with their best friends. They both lose them, first to their rivals and then to death. They both then become solitary, spiteful men, which is a good way of creating compelling characters, I think. And then, after some years, they both interact with the children of their gone loves and rivals, Catherine Linton and Harry Potter respectively. And these kids both resemble their fathers, except for their eyes, which are their mothers. And all of this adds to fuel the distaste that Heathcliff and Snape feel for them. While in the end their stories diverge at this point, I still will forever link them in my mind as some of the best characters out there. And in a way, this is reminding me of The Secret Garden and how the father in that story resembles Heathcliff in a way because he loses his young love and becomes seclusive. But getting back only to Wuthering Heights, I really hope that one day I can take a course analyzing this story and their characters, because while delving into their minds might be a scary feat, I really want to feel that I'm under their skin, at least more than I have already done. Anyways, moving on to the 4 adaptations of Wuthering Heights. The one from 1992 is my favorite one because it was my introduction to the story, and whenever I reread the novel, I picture its actors in my mind. I really love Ralph Fiennes as Heathcliff, and I think it's interesting they make the same actress reprise the role of Catherine and then of her daughter, because it means an added weight and complexity on Heathcliff's feelings toward Catherine Linton. It's almost like imagine what Snape would have done and thought if Harry Potter had been a girl and looked like Lily Evans. Again, he in the end did protect Harry, whereas Heathcliff hated John Catherine to the end. But still, it is an interesting idea. Besides, I think this was one of the first, if not the very first version of an adaptation of Wuthering Heights that covered the 2 generations of the story. So kudos for this one. My favorite. We then have the 1939 movie. It's absolutely gorgeous and bleak and passionate, and I love it. Laurence Olivier as Heathcliff was irresistible, and when I learned that my grandmother fell for him in this movie, I thought it was amazing that her granddaughter followed in her footsteps. Besides, since I love old Hollywood classics, this is just a cinematic treasure. And since Vivien Leigh, Laurence Olivier's second wife, is my favorite actress ever, besides Vanessa Redgrave, I think it's great that while Olivier shot at Wuthering Heights, she was doing Gone with the Wind, my favorite book and movie ever. The 1970 adaptation I enjoyed mainly because of Timothy Dalton. I love him and I think he's one of the handsomest men ever, and I like how young he was when he played Heathcliff, and then I enjoy comparing him here with his appearance in Jane Eyre in the 80s. Seeing as he's both playing Heathcliff and Rochester, 2 of the most famous Byronic heroes ever, characters that were written by 2 sisters. And finally, the 2009 TV series is very enjoyable because it covers a lot of the plot, and I like Tom Hardy's portrayal of Heathcliff a lot. He was outstanding, and I like the sexier elements they added into his relationship with Catherine. Though it is odd, seeing as in the book we barely get a mention of Catherine being pregnant, it was a forbidden subject. way back in the 19th century, not to be discussed openly. But still, we can argue the case that despite his flaws, Heathcliff doesn't lack animal magnetism. I wouldn't be surprised if Wuthering Heights is one of the books with most adaptations ever made. But overall, so far, I'm only excited about watching 2 more that I have yet to see. The one from 1967 with Ian McShane, so I want to watch his portrayal of Heathcliff, and the one from 2011 starring Kaya Scodelario and James Hawson. If more adaptations are made in the future, I shall of course be watching and reviewing them. But for the moment, I believe this is all I have to say about Wuthering Heights. Thank you very much for watching my review of it. Please let me know if you enjoyed it or not, and share with me as well what are your own thoughts on this story, because I would love to talk about it with you. In the description box below, you can find a link to the Goodreads page for the book, as well as a link to the IMDB page for all of the adaptations that I reviewed. Anyways, I'm Caro Herrera, the Mental Traveler, and I hope you have a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. I'll be seeing you soon. Goodbye.